Good morning, afternoon, evening. Again, hope all is well, staying safe out there. This is going to be part 5 lecture, Industrial Revolution, and this will be the final lecture on Industrial Revolution before we get into imperialism. Now, looking at the Industrial Revolution, first you need to understand where this thing originates around, what energy source it originates around. It was underneath our fingertips, under our nose for centuries, and it won't be until the 1700s that an individual actually pieces it together and figures out how we could use this energy source, use this inconvenience, this danger at the time, into an energy source and actually move things with it. And that is the power of steam. And we look here, it's something that was kind of just stumbled upon, and it'll be stumbled upon in a place called Great Britain. And remember, the necessity is the mother of invention, they say, and curiosity is the father. And we look here that the England will be the home to the Industrial Revolution, and it will be the first to transfer steam power into the use of an energy source. And if you're going to need steam, there you need water, and obviously you need it boiling. And these early Industrial Revolution, these cities will be located right next to rivers to ensure that they can have direct access to these water sources, to ensure they can use this steam as a means to move. It will first be used in coal mines, and again to kind of pull the water out of these mines. And then eventually it will be transferred into the workshops of the textile mills. So steam will be at the forefront. It'll eventually, in steam, we have to think of coal burning. We'll see coal is used. England has a ton of coal. They don't have a lot of wood, but they have a ton of coal. And this will be, again, used for the steam, to kind of make steam, to kind of push the Industrial Revolution forward. And eventually that will be replaced in the early 1900s by something called oil. Now, if we're looking here, changes are going to be taking place quickly. It will be improved by somebody. The first steam engine will be improved by a guy by the name of Watt, and he's going to kind of transform the steam engine. Make sure this is working. And by the first steam engine actually been at the end of the 17th century, late 1600s, by a guy by the name of Thomas Savery, again to pull the water out of the mines. But it will be improved on by James Watt in mid 18th century, and again that'll be transformed into the textile mills. So change is coming. As we know, the Industrial Revolution really is all about change. And the things I mentioned, people moving to the cities, working with strangers, pulling themselves from the rural areas, the farms, getting monotonous, tedious work, and then the working and living conditions are going to change drastically. And we see that the Industrial Revolution, which people used to work with family businesses and with their neighbors in small cottages, on the farms, around the farms, I should say, and now it's all about the individual. It's all about moving into these cities and having a boss that you do not know and you have not known. And you can see the living conditions here. Look at this early industrial city. You can see the electric trolley here, see electric wires. So we've manned electricity. This photograph, you can see the bikes. So we know it's got to be late 1800s at the very least. And just look how crowded this city is, and the population density with this. It's just, you talk about crowded, and this is before we have street lights and all that as well, but this looks chaotic to me. And again, these people working in these factories, they were just kind of a cog in the machine, and we have all kinds of effects of the Industrial Revolution. Like I mentioned, on the living and working condition, we have women who are going to get out of working in the kitchen, which was something that they were child rearing, and grow little local little crops right up outside the door that we could harvest, and working in the kitchen and cooking, cleaning, stuff like that, which again was gender role of the time. This is going to break them out of these gender roles, and really, I mean, we can focus on the exploitation of the women and being used for cheap labor, and that's what these owners will use them for. They're also known to have higher dexterity with their fingers, and this is why whenever the typewriter and all that stuff comes around, it'll be used for that, secretarial work. But the textiles as well, they have experience with the sewing. So they're going to bring in and we're going to use these women, and you can also see children used in some of these factories to provide a cheap labor source and to maximize profit for these owners. But again, there's articles we can look at. I'm going to have you guys read, but we could focus on the negative, or we can focus on it gets them out of the kitchen. They get around each other. It's going to empower them. They're going to realize they have a personality, that they are more than just somebody who's in the house and child rearing. But these are actually working class women. Middle class, upper class women it'd be frowned upon to work in the factories. So instead, working class women will fill these roles, and they would be in, they'd work these long hours and have to go home and still tend to the house. Very patriarchal society, where male dominated, and while the men would work and then they'd go to the bars where weren't open to women at the time. And this is looking at, and whatever you want to focus on, you can. But early on, these women, it's going to be very hard working conditions, very long days, and then going home to very squalid conditions as well, poor, and again, asked to do a lot of the everyday things. So again, for working class women. Now, Industrial Revolution, as mentioned, what starts in the United Kingdom, and this will be England. It'll come out of the starting block alone, and it's going to have a huge leg up on everybody else. No other country was as prepared. They have a lot of merchant ships. They're heading out. They're doing a lot of scientific research. They have a tradition around science. They have a work ethic. They have, religious tolerance. They have a lot of coal, as I mentioned, which is a necessity for the early steam. And they have efficient transportation networks of roads and canals. And they're, looking at England here, United Kingdom, geography plays a role. They are 70 miles. There's any place you are in England, you're 70 miles away from the sea. So you can see, again, the power of geography. And this, looking at this island, their access to the markets they can get to right away. Whether they want to head west to Atlantic, go south around Africa into Asian markets. And this is before the Suez Canal was built. And again, the government was a kind of capitalist kind of promoter. They really promoted the merchant class, go out, make goods, bring goods in, and this selling and commerce, buying and trading. So then there's not a shortage of capital, a lot of money. People are investing this money. We see lines of credit up, and transportation was pretty cheap in England because of this access. And, so we see all these different things play a role. And again, they didn't have wood because it's an island. There's not a ton of wood. They're going to turn to coal, and their population's going to grow as well. And, coal is 3 times more energy efficient than wood in and of itself as well. And it's easily mined in the coal mines of England. And, again, they get that steam engine that pumps the water out of there. And their intellectual climate, they're all about education, and they're all about, pursuing and being energetic, and discovering new things and being innovative. And again, they're gonna get a leg up, and knowing that they get the leg up, they'll be the number 1 imperializers as well, and they're really going to conquer and influence the world, much like we do today. There's a quote that the sun never set on the English Empire, in the sense of the sun was always up somewhere, and and then this is going to be something that they take pride in, and they're going to have a very strong navy and able to get to these places and respond and conquer these places, and again influence and take their resources for worse for those areas. Also spread their technology and ideas. So this is looking at the Industrial Revolution in England, and 1/3 of the world trade will work through there eventually, and it's a place that will be the most powerful country in Europe up until the early 1900s. And we'll look at that, what happens and how it shifts from them to pot. You can make the argument Germany, but to America eventually. Now, we have here, it's a workshop of the world. It is the leader of innovation, and it's something that, again, is going to provide goods and steal goods from others throughout the world. And these innovations will eventually leave, and they're going to try to keep a cap and a lid on their new innovations. For example, engineers weren't allowed to leave. We're not allowed to come and go. People were not allowed to just go into these factories and steal this stuff. They really try to protect it, much like we try to protect our atomic secrets. They're going to attempt to protect their industrial secrets of the day. And again, they have a leg up on everybody else, and they're trying to continue to do that so they have an advantage over everybody else when it comes to world affairs. But this industrial revolution, we see the workforce is going to be forced to leave their farms and move into the cities. We see an enclosure system where this property was just land before they put fences up and before they enclosed these places. And people just live off the land, but whenever these owners of the land realize they can make more profit, they're going to start enclosing this and make private property out of it. And again, with the agricultural revolution, the new reapers, the new innovations on the farms, crop rotations, new sciences behind it, they're going to be able to maximize more food with less farmers needed. And we see a shift from people working on the farms to moving into urban areas. And those who did not, peasants who did not move to the cities, life did not improve for them just by sticking around. 6-year-olds to 8-year-olds to 12-year-olds, they'd be working 16, 18-hour days on the farms anyway. This is why, like, even suntans, like tans, they were frowned upon at the time because it showed that you were working class out in the farms. You were part of the peasantry. So we can see, that the aristocracy would want to be paler complexion because it shows that they can go inside. They don't have to go work out in the fields. But again, we see this shift of people moving from the farms when there's no longer a need for all these farmers into the city. Some of them went willfully. Others went kicking and screaming. Again, kids your age probably be a little more excited to go to the city. There probably be some things there, some perks living in the city they didn't have on the farms. But again, life before the Industrial Revolution, 90% of the people were farmers. Today, only 2% of the people are farmers throughout the world. But think about how crazy that is. 2% of the population, farmers, can feed 7 billion people. Again, it shows you how efficient we've gotten over the time. And we can see, this urban revolution, without the agricultural revolution, could never have taken off. It could, again, if you're going to have all these people living in these cities, you're going to need to be able to feed them. And you have to be able to supply the food to them and make sure you get the food there efficiently so it doesn't rot by the time it gets there. And we'll see that in the early America with, trying to find ways to preserve this food, whether you're putting, salt on it and trying to keep it refrigerated the best you can before the refrigerated cars, using ice blocks and putting sawdust on ice blocks to make it, last. So we see this is looking at all the problems with early on. And early on you got to remind yourself that a lot of this meat was probably pretty spoiled, and they put food coloring in, dye products in it, to try to make it look good, but it could kill you. And these cities were a pretty dangerous place to live, especially with water and cholera outbreaks, typhoid fever, and it's very dangerous to drink the water in these cities. Very, very, very dangerous. But anyway, so we look here, some famous paintings. On the right here we got the Forgotten Workers, and we can see that conditions. These guys are faceless. They're shadowy. And yeah, I think the artist makes them faceless. See the industry here, they're heading there. They don't look excited. They're kind of walking there solemnly. This is kind of the portrait, the picture people have in the Industrial Revolution. Stuff like this. They don't have a face. They're nameless. They're just a number. And they go into these working conditions, and these are very difficult conditions. Long hours, low pay, very dangerous, loud. You're working with people you don't know, maybe even speak a different language, and it's just a very difficult time to be part of at this time. Now, as I mentioned, women work in the factories. We also had for the working class, children were also forced to work in the factories, long hours. And we have to look at it. The working class families needed their children to work in these factories, but also B, they worked the farms already, so they thought it was good for their character to go work in these factories. They worked the farms, so why wouldn't they work to work in the factories and help? But we have to look at this. Early on, the public education wasn't there yet, but those who are working, in the middle class, upper class, their children aren't working in the factories. So they're able to get the schooling, which is going to lead to a bigger gap educationally, intellectually, than the working class oftentimes. So we need to remind ourselves, this education is important. This is why they're going to make it mandatory eventually for public schooling, to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get educated, to get themselves out of a tough situation. Now, the worst off were the children who were orphans. They had nobody to look after them. And what would happen is some business owners would either go to the orphanages, take these kids out, or they'd even run the orphanages, and then use these kids as basically slave labor. But they provide shelter and food, but they're not really having to pay them. If kids came in late, going back to the time, I remember reading accounts where they'd call it waiting, where if a kid came in late, they would actually attach a weight with a chain to his neck. He'd have to stand there all day, which would cause permanent damage to the neck and the spinal cord, as a way to punish. And again, that wasn't everybody, but that did happen. So you had exploitation. They'd pay these kids very low wages. They'd go, if a machine got stuck, they're small enough to climb in there and help it grab stuff out. So this is really what the children are going to be used as. And, again, life expectancy for the working class was like 17 years of age, whereas about 38 for the richer and to expected to live. So again, we can see how that gap in not only wealth, but also how long someone was expected to live. And, the work condition in these factories was grueling. And, we have, kids working in the coal mines as well, helping pull this stuff out. Again, they can squeeze in there. And we can see this painting here capturing the brutality of it. Don't know how realistic that would be. This is where the mule comes from. It's actually a man-made creation. The mule, it was a hybrid between a donkey and a horse. And the mule they found was a good little industrial worker as well. They would use in these factories. Here's some other paintings. This is by Kathy Kollwitz, who was a famous painter, Expressionism. Again, this is kind of capturing the mood of the time of Industrial Revolution, how it was brutal to the workers. And, these people forced to work in these situations. You can see her painting this mother holding her dead child to the farmers, for basically the mules of the fields of the day. And you have the working class people here again at the mercy of the owners and crowding around, very sad faces. And this again is capturing the mood of the Industrial Revolution for the lower class. And this is really what the Industrial Revolution focuses a lot on, is the lower class. And when I mean lower class, I mean the working class, who are not making the wages. That's what I mean by that, that are equal to the upper middle classes in regards to standard of living. Living conditions, again, very poor here. We can see the children sleeping. Again, we got to remind ourselves, a lot of these photographs, they're staged. It's not like just taking a picture real quick. I mean, these have to set up these photographs. These photographers have set up. They're really trying to capture the mood here. You can see the children without shoes. Again, they would be roaming the streets on their own. These women who are forced to work these long hours wouldn't be below them or above them to come home if they have a crying baby, to give them some opium to go to sleep. So this is the conditions these people have here. You got crowded conditions where people are sleeping, 8 in a room, 9 in a room, whole families packed in one room. And these are the slums, they were called. These are called tenement houses, where, again, they're not up to code. If you had a fire, it'd be very dangerous. It spread pretty quickly in these really quickly constructed homes. These tenement houses, also called dumbbell buildings, kind of shaped like a dumbbell. You'd have a little courtyard in between and the buildings on each side. But these tenement houses packed in up here, very horrible conditions. You're going to see, photographers in America, I know, capture some pictures that kind of capture these living conditions. But this is really the plight. And the government was laissez-faire. They didn't do anything. They didn't help these people. It was kind of going back to that social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. If you want to get out of this condition, get fitter. Go get. It's cold-hearted. It's very callous. Take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself in this society, or you have to depend on middle and upper class people kind of taking care of you. You would have, you'd have these hall houses in Chicago and these cities, which were, upper class families who would open up a place where that would bring in these people to get educated, these immigrants, to help them transition to America, assimilate. They have parties and food gatherings and educational classes, trainings for these people. But again, that's later on. And early on, England starts it, and eventually it spreads. So England will be ahead of everybody else with a lot of these regulations that start coming down the pike, down the road. But early on, not so well. Coke times. I'm going to have you guys read. Here's a picture of Charles Dickens. I just like this quote just for the life. We look back on eras, whether you're looking at the 90s, the 80s, present day versus 50 years from now. just kind of, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Again, what do you want to focus on? This is the Industrial Revolution. Or focus on the good, the bad, that's up to you. We can kind of choose both. And I'm going to have you guys read Coketown from a book called Hard Times. And it's just a page. I'm going to have you guys do an illustration on that. You're going to be doing some drawing. I want you to capture the imagery from the artist, either figuratively or literally. And again, it's a laissez-faire system where the government less is more. We do not live in that society anymore. For better and worse, and it's a market economy that the government's hands off, allow supply and demand take care of itself. If people demand it, they will supply it. And again, this one here is capturing mass unemployment, and the government's sleeping over here. The government's hands off in a market economy. We're more of a mixed economy today where we have government intervention, we have regulations. Now, because the owners and the government's not helping out, we do see people start to organize. They realize they want to have better wages. They want to have shorter working days. They want to have safer conditions. They want their voice heard. So you will see the organization of labor unions throughout England to start. Again, when these other countries start to industrialize, you'll see these labor unions popping up there as well. And again, if the owners aren't going to help them, the government's not going to help them. They have to help themselves. This is the day, and we see the union organizing. Early on, the owners will do all they can to break up the unions. You will see politicians do all they can to break up the unions, but eventually these people get more of a voice. And this goes back to the scarcity too. Those who are skilled laborers, they have more power than the unskilled. And what I mean by that is when the skilled workers organize as one, you can't replace these people as easy as those who are unskilled, where they can train people to do it within a week. So this is where we're at even today in many regards. So again, try to get skilled in something. Now, because of this environment, we see people getting taken advantage of. We see the child labor, people dying, starving to death, struggling in this capitalist society, and all in the name of profit, and children dying in the name of profit, and people focused only on profit and not to humanity will lead to a bunch of people, different individuals, start clamoring for socialism and communism and how capitalism was evil. And we will see these different people have these ideas. But you look on the right here, he's German born, but he lives in London. He's in the home of the Industrial Revolution. He's going to argue there needs to be a new system. This capitalism is broken. Laissez-faire doesn't work. We need to blow this thing up. We need to start a revolution, and we need to overthrow the government and start a new system of communism where everybody shares everything. And he's going to start that in 1848, his book, Das Kapital. And this is going to be all about, Das Kapital, it's going to be all about starting up this communist revolution, blowing the system up. And again, we see this locomotive start to move here in the early mid 1800s. Eventually, it's going to come about in a place called Russia. And you're looking at 1905 up here. The Russians will have a big revolution, 1905. It's known as Bloody Sunday, where people start to protest these inhumane conditions. And Russia was always behind in treating their workers well. You're going to see Russia during a Russo-Japanese war, which will lead to Russia being embarrassed by the Japanese in that war time and again. You're going to see the people have a revolution, and they'll be shot down and crushed, that revolution. But it's a nice little, rough draft, or precursor to another revolution coming a decade later in Russia, a little over a decade later during World War I, the Bolshevik Revolution, following the Russian Revolution. So we see that Bolshevik Revolution will lead to communism in Russia. So we see it kind of clamoring here. And these ideas here, long after he's dead, will be instituted in these countries. So that's the Industrial Revolution in a nutshell. I move quick. Try to make sure that that less is more approach. Hopefully you guys are able to look at this and have a good grasp of what it is and what kind of changes the Industrial Revolution is bringing about. So, without further ado,